Hi, guys. It's Alexis Wolf with the Fiery Sword Global Ministries. We are back in my book, Looking for God, Volume 2, and we are in Chapter 5, Joseph's Wilderness, Part 2. We'll pick up with Genesis 40, verses 14 through 15. Only keep me in mind when it goes well with you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house. For I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should have put me into the dungeon. So he is crying out, saying, okay, don't forget me. In Genesis chapter 40, we see where Joseph supernaturally correctly interpreted dreams for the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt. One had been falsely accused and the other correctly. Joseph asked them to please remember him and let the Pharaoh know of his plight. A full 2 years passed before the cupbearer told Pharaoh of Joseph and his ability to properly interpret dreams. Boy, 2 years is something else. I mean, could you imagine sitting in a prison for 2 years, which you've already been there? And he waited. Here, we're back to the waiting on God's perfect timing. It is crucial that we not jump out too soon because we're going to have to circle back around to get to where God wants us. So, how frustrating that must have been for Joseph, yet he continued the path of righteousness despite possibly feeling rejected and forgotten. Lost my place. I'm most certain that in his spiritually weak moments, which every person faces occasionally, of course, present company included, he must have felt forsaken by God. After all, at the tender age of 17, God had given him prophetic dreams that his entire family and multitudes would bow to him. Yet, there he sat in prison. Some God, huh? Let's read on. It's very exciting. Genesis 39:21. But the Lord, we're backing up. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. Now we'll fast forward. Genesis 41, verse 1. Now it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream. No, timing. Here we see the continued grace and favor of God, even in prison. This is 2 years from the time Joseph correctly interpreted the dreams of two of Pharaoh's servants who were imprisoned with him. He had asked them to remember him. They did. It only took 2 years. Joseph could have gotten bent out of shape and bitter that these two men who promised to remember forgot him for so long. Joseph must have clearly understood God's perfect timing. Because of his wisdom, he obviously did not sit around waiting for someone to release him from prison. No. He continued going about his father's business and left it all for God to handle. Then Pharaoh sent and called for, this is Genesis 41, this is a variety, 14 and then 39 through 44. Bear with me because we skip around. So Genesis 41, several scriptures. Then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. It's funny that you wait, and then hurriedly. I love that. I love that so much. And then suddenly, but that's a whole other message. Anyway, then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has informed you of all this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. Here is where God begins to show himself, that through waiting and patience and endurance, now we're seeing God really do what he's been doing all along, but now we're seeing the action of that. You shall be over my house, and according to your command, all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. And I don't want to skip ahead. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. Moreover, there's more. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission, no one shall raise a hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. What? That is spectacular. Taking the war. Okay, let me not get ahead. Let me read. It's just exciting. Joseph was 17 when his brothers threw him into a pit. He was 30 by the time he stood before Pharaoh. And we'll see this in Genesis 41:46. 13 years lapsed before Joseph arrived at his destination, foretold in his dreams God had granted, prophesying his brothers and his parents would bow before him. Has God ever spoken something to you, and if it did not happen instantly, you gave up on God? It would behoove us all to recognize there is always a process to get where God is taking us. We talked about this in the last video. When we do, we must go through, not around, each step and not allow ourselves to become impatient, taking matters into our own hands. When we do, we birth our own enemy. That was alarming to me when I first recognized that. Birthing our own enemy. Satan is the God of quick fixes. Yahweh is the God of patience, perseverance, and endurance. We mentioned that in the last video. Observe what happened when Joseph did not come against authority. Here's the thing about authority again. Joseph respected the authority in enemy territory and ended ruling all the land of the enemy. Joseph ruled in the same place where before these people had all but destroyed God's people. Of course, they couldn't be destroyed, but they were enslaved and tortured, and bad things were happening to the Israelites. And I lost my place. I get excited. Observe what happened to Joseph when he did not come against authority. Joseph respected the authority in enemy territory and ended ruling in the land of the enemy. He was not ruler in his own land, but in foreign soil. That's the hand of a mighty, all-powerful God. What can't God accomplish when we get aligned in obedience and humility in him? These very people, his own flesh and blood, who had mocked, hated, threw him into a pit with the intention of murder, and then turned and broke bread without care, are comforted and cared by Joseph. And that now we're in in Genesis 50, verses 15 through 21. Joseph went so far as to speak kindly to them without sarcasm or guilt laid upon them. And we're talking about his brothers. During the famine, they came to him. They didn't know it was Joseph, and they're looking for something from Joseph. By the time Israel died, somehow I skipped this, but Israel died. Their dad died, and so they were sure that that Joseph was going to kill them in revenge for what they had done to him. But Joseph didn't, because he understood God. But he dealt with them without sarcasm or guilt laid upon them. This is the epitome of walking in humility. Joseph blessed those who cursed him because he understood and recognized the hand of God in everything all along the path. And I love this. Two more scriptures. Psalm 25:21. Let integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait on thee. That's David. And then Proverbs 11:3. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. The word says that integrity will protect and guide us. It certainly protected Joseph. And do we conduct ourselves in the integrity and faithfulness of Joseph, no matter what chaos surrounds us? Do we trust that God is in love with us and will allow all for our good and comfort, including the coronavirus, including the government, including all these other horrible things that are going on? Do we trust God? If so, there is nothing to fear and nothing worthy of the actions of anger, because we have a heart set on Christ. James 1:20. Satan will try to provoke us to anger, but we are not to allow his tactics to affect us. When we sense it coming, we are to remind ourselves of the faithfulness of God and that he will contend with those who contend with us. Selah.